We're going to show each other grammar grace, because this is a safe space. And you know how we are as administrators and educators, we want to dot every I and cross every T. When we're asking you to put information in the chat, just go ahead and get it in there. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. This is a safe space. We show grace. We're not worried about the grammar. We just want you to really be free and open to join and have your content shared with everyone. And really, this is a seeking and sharing opportunity. I'm so glad this is being recorded, because we'll be able to go back and look and see what are our colleagues saying. I saw Tammy Nadaro on here. Hi, Tammy, who is just the community-based advocate and queen of expertise, just really out there advocating to make sure that our community-based organizations are thought of in every single thing that we do. So we want to seek and share wisdom with our community-based organizations. We have a lot of private facilities that may have PFAE funding. So we really want to have a full effect of being able to seek and share wisdom, all of us together. Although Michelle and I are your facilitators today, we wholly recognize that we all have so much to share. And so having said that, hello, in my Adele voice, but I don't want to sing and make anybody tune out today. So we'd love for you to go ahead and jump in the chat and let us know where you're from. Are you from a district, charter program, private, community-based, Head Start? If you are other, please go ahead and put that in the chat. I do want to, again, just kind of forewarn you that we're going to be asking you to multitask. So we're going to be saying, go ahead and drop that in the chat, and then moving right on to the next slide, because we really do have so much information to cover today. And we want to make sure that we do save some time for people to be able to come off mute at the end and ask any questions that you might have. So thanks. I see him rolling in, seeing some familiar names there. Hi, Lisa Hobson. I think I saw Chris Pennington on here. My partner in crime, Kim Nelson from Rockford. Hey, babe, how you doing? And then as you're putting in where you're from, please put also your current role. We do know that this, Jasmine, Michelle, I'm already going off script. There you have it. Jasmine, I saw early Head Start, woo-hoo, Head Start is in the house, love it. Please share your role. We do know that this is the PFAE Administrators Forum. We also know that sometimes administrators have to ask someone to join on their behalf. So please let us know your current role. If you are a family specialist, particularly so important, parent, guardian, if it's other, please type that in as well. Hey, Lynn Burgett, how are you today?
What's the name?
Gonna give you all a little bit of time. Carol, family coordinator, yes, love it. And we also want to remind everyone to make sure that they are on mute if they are not speaking. I just saw someone that said family engagement, woohoo, Lakita, hi, family engagement. Almost, when I saw Paris, I kind of thought of Paris. Oh, I need to travel. Paris, Illinois is in the house. Instructional elementary educator, Toddlertown from Evanston, love it. Hey, Tamara Sanders, ISB principal consultant. Lots of directors are on. This is just, Maywood. Oh my goodness. Hi, Maywood. Nice to see you in the house. So many assistant principals, family support specialists. We have a really nice, I think, portfolio of expertise here from teachers, family engagement. So it's going to be really nice to see. Hi, Tiona Williams from Tiona. Hey, girl from East Aurora. How you doing? Jasmine from Gads Hill Center. Yes, wonderful. So nice to see all of you all. And as you're doing that, keep it coming. We definitely want you to let us know what knowledge or skill you'd like to take away from our time together today. Hey, Brandy, you thought I wasn't going to see you. Hello, Miss Brandy, how are you? What knowledge or skills that you all would want to take away from you? And again, there are a lot of us here today. We do want to know this information, specifically if once we get to the part where we come off mute and we do the Q&A, if we don't get to any particular concerns for regions. As we know, Illinois is a big state and certain areas, certain constituencies have different concerns. So we want to try to see if there's any general, like universal knowledge that people are looking for, or if there's something that's specific to your own area. Just in case you have any Q&A that we don't get to at all, this is my website. You can reach me through that website. As I said before, Michelle and I, Cindy and her team, and Jenny, we're very interested in making sure we do whatever follow-up we can to support you in this work. So that is my website. You can reach me directly through there as soon as you prove you're not a robot. Those messages, actually, they come directly to my phone, doesn't go through a secretary or anyone else, comes directly to my phone and my email address so that we can make sure we respond in a timely manner. It is important for us to just kind of say first things first here, especially during this time that we are in now. The first things first we want to share is that, and keep those what I want to grow coming in. I am looking at them as I'm moving on. We want to be very careful that we are messaging the message that have come from the Department of Education, the State Board of Education of Illinois, and of course the governor's office. And what the Department of Ed has been telling us, literally, really all the time, but specifically during the beginning of the pandemic, the federal law of the land is exactly that. These are laws that are created and built on evidence-based practices and knowledge and research. And so these are things that whatever we are doing should not be circumvented, and nothing should be done to prevent or preempt anything. And that is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, Americans with Disabilities Act, the Every Student Succeeds Act. Our state does have an ESSA plan. And so we are certainly held accountable to what we created in our ESSA plan. We know that the state board has been given guidance with COVID-19 updates and guidance all along. Obviously, anything coming from our governor's office as far as executive orders. And then as districts have gone back into schools, and not only this year, but are thinking about next year, obviously we want to make sure that we are respectful and mindful of whatever district initiatives, or if you are in a program, what your director has determined. We know we have EHS and Head Start here, so we know the Head Start frameworks, they've been very, very quick to respond to COVID needs. So we just want to make sure that we're telling you that all the information that we're sharing with you today. Hey, Kathy Davis, how are you? We want to let you know that the information, it's good, it's tried and true, but we also want to always keep in mind what is important and what our federal guidelines and our state guidelines are telling us. And then we've got a special guest with us today, the COVID early childhood education and care to kindergarten transition expert. Participants, I'd like to introduce you to, what's happening? Did they leave in a blank slide? No, that slide is there to let us know no one is the expert. No one is the singular expert in transitioning children from early childhood education and care to kindergarten during a pandemic such as COVID. And since no one is the singular expert, we are all the experts. So we just want to let you know, as we're going through this and we're working it out together, even though we have to social distance, we can't really huddle, but we can virtually huddle like the PFAE forums have been helping us do. And we can take our ideas and bring them together so that we're all learning what is needed to support whole schools, whole communities, and more importantly, whole children. So I love this slide because the truth is, life beyond preschool for all expansion, Head Start, and community-based programs, it's not a novel idea. If you think about it, children have been going from preschool to kindergarten ever since the romper room lady and Miss Crump from Andy Griffin, right? We've been talking about pre-K to kindergarten for a long time. Yet today, over 100 of us have come together to try to figure out why this long time conversation should be seamless consistency of practice. Why are we still losing children? Why are we still losing families? Why haven't we really figured out how to have those partnerships that are consistent across EI to ECSE to kindergarten, and going back to that first slide, the transitions well beyond that? And the problem is kind of that sometimes in education, we have these parallel lines. We're all talking about the same thing, but we talk about it specifically from our own point of view or from our own discipline. And we don't necessarily have that intersection of ideas and that cross-referencing of ideas and concepts. We know this is true in Illinois. Hey, Chris Pennington, I'm about to talk about some of the work you did with the KTAC committee. In Illinois, we actually had the General Assembly created a joint resolution to talk about what needs to happen. First of all, look at the research, look at the practices in Illinois, and then submit a report that would help us understand what needs to happen so that we strengthen the practices of transitioning children from early childhood education and care to kindergarten. It is a wonderful support. I just called out Chris Pennington. She didn't know I was going to do that, but Chris jumped right in with the chats. The committee itself met for a little bit over six-ish months. They did a lot of interviewing of people, agencies, organizations. I was blessed to be invited. I was not an appointee on this committee, but I was blessed to be invited by the chairpersons, which was Dr. Tate, former executive director of GoECD, and now Senator Dr. Christina Pacione-Zayas. They were the co-chairs. They allowed me to come in and just kind of give thoughts when it comes to students with disabilities and just some other kind of lay of the land things. And that report, here are some excerpts of what we needed to talk about, and really, again, not new and novel ideas, but sometimes you have to revisit what you should have been doing and what we think everyone was doing. What are those best practices that are needed? We need to be able to describe, that's a big one. What are the describing and demonstrate activities present in successful programs? And that comes in that we are all the experts, right? How can we seek and share wisdom with each other? The report itself is in themes, and the themes are what you see before you. These are just some of the wording that's in those themes, and you do have this link in your resource page that you're going to get that talks about the KTAC report more, but this is just one of the pieces of the theme, aligned teaching and learning. Here's aligned assessments and data. And then the one that we think really pertains to our work today, strengthening those cross-sector partnerships so that really there's not just one small person or one small department that knows what transitioning looks like. It really should be whole school, whole community coming together to understand what it looks like to have all of these pieces of diversity, love these color bands here coming together to really strengthen the work that we do. You can't do that work without communities. Reaching out to our community partners, which, by the way, Preschool for All expansion, MOUs are a part of the compliance measure that must be done in our Preschool for All programs. How do we bring those MOUs to life? How are we really collaborating with our community partners, our Head Start partners, our Archdiocese partners? How are we really making that happen in a way that all of us are sharing information so that children that are aging out of programs and going into districts, we really have that opportunity for families to be engaged across the board. We are taking a little bit of poetic license here as well. We are talking about early childhood education and care, but I do think it's important for us to just think about the fact that these practices can be generalized. They can be generalized from PI to early PI prevention initiative, early intervention, child and family connections, early Head Start, everything that we're talking about today. It can go back and catch EHS, PI, early childhood education and care, and it can spring forward and talk about kindergarten and beyond. We really want to think about language that we're using as we consider all of the, who is the all when we think about strengthening cross-sector partnerships, who is the all when we think about whole school. We want to think about groups not as subgroups, not as at risk or underserved or disenfranchised. Who are our special populations? And it is so true that when we're thinking about any type of work, but particularly transitioning students, we want to think about what are the specific needs of special populations that we may be serving. And this gets to the heart of equity, which our state has a strategic plan. And within our state strategic plan, there is specific language around equity, quality, collaboration, and community. So thinking about the students who are in care, students who are multilingual learners, students who may be immigrants, students who are experiencing temporary homelessness. We want to think about all, we know that we have a lot of people coming into America because of the war with Russia and Ukraine. Who are our students who might be refugees? We want to think about all of those things, and we want to have aligned professional development so that we can serve their needs better. We want to think about developmentally appropriate practices, all of these things. How do we address challenging behavior, observation and assessment, family engagement, all of these things that help us think about if we align our professional development, we're better able to serve these families. And aligned professional development is definitely two-way. Actually, it's probably multi-ways, but it certainly should be that EHS, early childhood to ECSE, early childhood education and care, and then the voice of our kindergarten colleagues as well. And you do see that question in there when, like, how does aligned practices, how might aligned practices support strong transitions? Go ahead and put your thoughts in the chat there. We are reading them. Just bringing out a little bit of information about students who are part of that special populations umbrella. Look at the data around children who are multilingual learners. And this is from 2016, so we know that this is a growing population. And because it's a growing population, ECPL has worked with WIDA, World Instructional Design and Assessment. They have lots of resources, which we have links for you, that will help you connect children who are multilingual learners. And this is not just, oh, they're a dual language learner, right? They must speak English and Spanish. Multilingual is more than just the child speaks English and then speaks Spanish. It really can be any language other than English. So we're trying to kind of get that language in there of multilingual learners. We do have resources for you for WIDA because through ECPL's work with EDA, these are free resources that are available to you. So we hope everyone will use them. We pulled this information up for students who are experiencing homelessness. I mean, just look what the State Board of Education is offering. You'll get these resources as well, but we just wanted to show you there's so much information out there to where we don't have to guess, and you can use this as part of in-services, conversations with families, conversations with your teams, your pre-K teams, your early childhood education and care teams. I do want to let you know, and this is all like compliance stuff that we're talking about here, whether you know it or not, Illinois actually has a preschool chronic absence bill. And within that bill, there is a requirement that as children are transitioning from early childhood education and care to kindergarten, you must include chronic absenteeism information to go to the the kindergarten. And this is just not, oh, the child was always absent. The law actually says that when you identify that a family is facing a barrier that keeps them from being consistent in attending, that you put systems of support in place for those families, and then you monitor that. And so when you send those children off to kindergarten, all of that information should go with them. And we think about our special populations, students who are experiencing homelessness, students who are multilingual learners, students who have a disability, have an IEP or 504 plan. We want to be very, very specific about this kind of information that we send along, because what we don't want our kindergarten colleagues to do is have to face surprises that could be circumvented if we sent good information along with our children when they're leaving us in early childhood education and care, or EHS to EI, as they are transitioning to kindergarten. And as Michelle is getting ready to pull up, I'm just going to look into the chats because I see so much has been coming in. Yes, Sarah, really good question. So in Illinois, the chronic absence number from pre-K to grade 12 is 10% of all absences. And that is excused, unexcused, and it includes suspension. And we know that Illinois has been doing a whole lot of work around expulsion and suspension of early learners. And so this chronic absence bill absolutely was actually meant to hold hands with our expulsion bill, so that we're not only talking about children being expelled, but being suspended, because we know that anytime children are not in their locations, it has an impact.
Okay, so everyone, I thank you so much, Antoinette. I think, it's important as we kind of segue between our two parts. I want to start to begin to think a little bit about practices and strategies to support transition. But I specifically really want to start just defining what transition is. So if we think about what should be included when we talk about the different transitions that occur during this period of time, we need to think of them less about a one-time event and more as a process. So thinking about transition as a process in which collaborative relationships are established. Antoinette's already kind of hinted at the collaboration that's needed during transitions to support consistency across programs. And so we're going to talk a lot about the ways that transition can do things that you can do during the transition that are going to build that collaboration and consistency. So again, as I mentioned, transition is not that one-time event, it is a process. So it could include lots of different activities, and it should support children, all children, but also children with disabilities or children that are multilingual learners before, during, and then after the transition. Yeah, transition is a long process. It should also require collaboration, as Antoinette mentioned. So we're thinking not just about the individuals in our own programs, but who else can we work with to support the students and the families that we work with. It could be that they're in the incoming program. It could be the program that the students are transitioning to. It could be administrative staff. It could be support staff, but it really needs to also include families. It also should support consistency. So making sure that we are creating events and activities and using practices that are kind of consistent. So is there opportunities for us to work with, if we're working in a preschool environment, is there opportunities for us to work with the kindergarten program to kind of see how we can do things similar, make things a little bit smoother and easier for our children and our families. And so we'll talk a little bit about that today and some ideas on ways to do that. It's definitely not something that you can jump into and think you can do everything at one period in time. You want to make sure that you're doing it strategically and working with individuals to find realistic and meaningful ways of doing those things for your program. So when we think a little bit about, now that you guys kind of have an idea of what transition is, it's important to kind of recognize that if we want to support all children during transition to kindergarten, we need to vary the practices and strategies that we use to support them. So we need to differentiate, right? Or provide accommodations, just like we do when we're providing high quality instruction to our students as teachers. A majority of what is currently being used is, or provided by programs in the state, are called low intensity practices. Those are the ones on that first row. These are providing some benefit to a wide variety of students, as they're typically planned for like a large group. It could be a classroom, it could be for a whole building, it could be for a whole program. And so some things like handouts that kind of give ideas to parents about like what are some things they can do to help prep their students for kindergarten. It could be a curriculum night event. Strategies could be like teachers creating a calendar of events that kind of give them a heads up about registration or open houses. It could be that you're creating a PowerPoint presentation to kind of describe how the classroom routines and the schedule looks in kindergarten. In terms of high intensity or individualized transition practices, those are things that we know that children with disabilities or children who have unique needs, maybe they're multilingual learners, those are what are really needed to help make their transition a little bit more successful. And these are things that individual teachers can do with their students, like having phone conversations with families, taking time to do a home visit, it could be a virtual home visit. I know that those became quite useful, especially during pandemic. It could be that we're just having individualized transition planning meetings because we know that the child has unique needs that we want to really talk through as a team. So examples of putting those practices into use would be creating some things like social stories that are based on an individual child's needs, that maybe walk them through some of the routines of the new classroom. Maybe it introduces them to new staff or the building itself. Perhaps the strategy is having a social worker check in with the child multiple times each day for the first few weeks of school to make sure that the child has an opportunity to, it doesn't have to be just negative things. It could be things like sharing celebrations, like sharing new things that went on in his day or her day, or expressing concerns as well and being able to address those. So why are high intensity practices important to use? Because I mentioned that a majority of individuals or programs use low intensity practices when we think about kindergarten transition, but it is important to highlight that some students are going to need a little bit more, right? Some families are going to need a little more. Why is that important? Well, let me share with you just a little bit about what we know about the transition to kindergarten for children who have those unique needs, specifically children with disabilities. So there is a framework that has been used for the past, oh my gosh, it's crazy, it's 15 years. That kind of highlights the importance of collaboration and communication. We know that the more that we have conversations with parents, especially who have children with disabilities, the better services and supports that they get. And I'll go back to this framework in a minute. We also know that a lot of things happen for children with disabilities as well as multilingual learners in terms of assessment and evaluation during this transition period. For children with disabilities, sometimes it's an annual review or it's a reevaluation. For multilingual learners, it could be that they're being assessed to understand what their language, where their language is currently is in terms of using English and instructional kind of evaluations that way. A lot of times parents, during meetings that correspond with those experiences, they feel they need to express more advocacy. They need to demonstrate more advocacy for their child during those transition meetings, during those experiences. And more so than in any other annual review or evaluation that might take place during their child's academic career. In that transition period from preschool to kindergarten, the advocacy is way off the charts. So they already feel like they know that they have to be good advocates for their child. They just aren't sure how. And we also aren't sure as to why that is. Is it that they don't know enough about what's going on in the new environment that makes them feel that they have to advocate for themselves more? That's a question that's still being researched. But we do know that teachers and parents express concerns about the transition process. I've done my own research, but it's also been something that's been revealed by other researchers in the field. We know that teachers are feeling very nervous about the transition to kindergarten. We know that teachers also are feeling a heavy responsibility and are also nervous about the transition as well. And so to best ensure that all students, including those with disabilities, are being served in the least restrictive environment for kindergarten, it's essential that we work with families and teachers to kind of collaborate and proactively kind of maintain or at least identify some supports and services that are going to be really helpful so that the child is successful in the new setting. So I mentioned the framework before. So theoretically, this makes kind of sense, right? So prior research has shown that transition really hinges on the alignment between alignment and continuity between preschool and kindergarten. It also is communication and relationships are really important, and a supportive infrastructure, meaning that, you know, there's appropriate time available to do things like schedule meetings, have PD, be able to collaborate. But more recently, in having conversations with kindergarten teachers and families and administrators, it has become even more apparent that it also needs a lot of the transition practices that we use should be designed around the individual child and family characteristics. If our goal is to help children and families be prepared and be able to successfully kind of adjust to the new environment, because that's what makes them successful in school, right? For some children and families, they're going to need more than just an open house or a flyer that describes things to do at home. We need to include them in the process of transition, understand what their unique characteristics are, and create practices that are going to get them to the point where they're prepared and adjusted. Differentiation is, you know, and individualization is really good for instruction, like I said before, but it's essential when we're planning transitions. So what do? It's really important to consider what are some low intensity practices and high intensity practices that we could use throughout the transition process. So let's take a look. I know you all are really excited to get some ideas of what we could do to support children and families. Let's take a look at some practices and strategies that would be considered low intensity and high intensity before, during, and then after the transition to kindergarten, because remembering it's a process. And these are going to be different. You know, again, you're not going to put all of these things into use because they're going to be different for a variety of programs and individual children, especially children who have disabilities or those who have multi-language learners. What you use in terms of practices and strategies is going to be different depending on what your needs are. So before the end of preschool, so you could be doing these things in the early or end of winter, it could be during spring. Even better, you could be thinking the year before, although I know sometimes that's really hard to do. Things that you might already be doing or that are good for your whole group of preschoolers are things like having that general collaboration between families, preschool and kindergarten teachers, administrators, using your program improvement process. See it as a school improvement thing where you're asking and evaluating, what are we doing right now? What's going really well? What are some things that we need to maybe do better? What are some things that we want to set as goals for ourselves this year when it comes to transition? It could also be that preschool classrooms are visiting a kindergarten classroom. This could be for lots of different reasons. It could be just to get a feel for what is going on in a kindergarten classroom today. I'm amazed to know that sometimes preschool teachers aren't really aware of what kindergarten looks like. And it's changed a lot over even just the past 20 years. So giving them a chance to kind of take a sneak peek. Kindergarten teachers could also visit a preschool classroom. Hey, what a thought, right? You know, same reason. Preschool looks a lot different. And I think a lot of people might be surprised at what goes on in a preschool classroom. So it's good to kind of be able to see what's going on. Again, you're thinking about how can we make things a little bit more smoother. So thinking alignment and continuity between programs. Also, kindergarten registration and screening activities, those are things that we do for all students. Kindergarten open houses, opportunities for all parents to understand things like kindergarten routines, expectations, the curriculum being used in the assessment. Those are all great things that are already being provided for the whole group. Things that perhaps you are doing, or maybe that you're not doing, that might be beneficial for some specific students who might need a little bit more support, are things like having the child and parent providing them with an opportunity to visit placement options prior to an IEP meeting when this is determined, giving the child and parent an opportunity to meet the child's actual kindergarten teacher and visit their new classroom prior to the transition. I know that sometimes it's very hard. I've talked to literally hundreds of administrators at this point, who some of them are able to do that, but some of them have a hard time doing that because they're not quite sure who's going to be assigned when in the spring. But if you can, it's always helpful to do that. Having members of a child's education team meet to discuss their strengths and needs, having the parents be a part of that conversation, and creating an individualized transition plan that has goals, specific strategies that are specific to that child's needs. And then kindergarten and preschool teachers could also even just meet to discuss individual strengths and needs of children and kind of come up with a little bit of a curriculum plan. And so it could be as formal or as informal as you can do. But I think the important thing is just to be thinking about what it is that you could do for specific students that might need a little more. In terms of related strategies, so before the end of preschool, some things that you might specifically do are, creating a social story. A simple, I'm going to kindergarten, that could be used with preschool children as a classroom, or it could be that you make an individual one for a student. Opportunities to practice specific skills and expectations of the new environment within the preschool setting and routines at home. And when we talk about this, I give the example of, is there a bath, like for instance, in preschool, a lot of the classrooms have bathrooms within the classroom, but then they go to kindergarten and they have to walk down the hall to the bathroom sometimes. And that can be a really hard transition for some students. So is there an opportunity that the preschool classroom at the end of the spring starts to incorporate using at least some of the visuals to help children indicate that they have to go to the bathroom? So a pass in the classroom, or could they start practicing that with an aide, like having them go as a group down to a bathroom in a hallway? Is there opportunities for that? Similarly, is there ways that we can use some of the visuals that are used in the preschool environment now in the kindergarten environment? Things like, the breaking down of tasks at a locker or things like that. It could also be that we're providing an individualized timeline of transition activities or a communication plan with parents so that, we have a way of saying, if something happens over the summer, maybe you guys go to the doctor, or you have a change in services, or maybe we have staff changes over the summer. Here's what you can do we will communicate that to you. I have a designated person that is assigned to making sure that those things are communicated to you. And also here's our contact information if something changes on your end at home over the summer that you kind of think would be helpful for us to know about. Those are just some ideas for things you could do before the end of the preschool school year. But now I want to hear from all of you. What are some things that before the end of the school year that maybe some of you in a preschool or those who work with preschool programs, whether it's Head Start or Preschool for All programs, what are some things that you guys do to support children's transition specifically before the end of preschool year? Feel free to share that in the chat. And Renee, I do see your question. I don't know if we're sending a link to slides. Antoinette, do you know the answer to that question?
Yes, you should have, I think in the handouts, you've got a PDF of this, but we are going to create a page that will have all of these links that we're talking about in a Word doc, so you all can just pull them off, copy and paste them into any search engine. Thanks, Renee.
And I love these ideas. So transition from taking naps daily, that's, oh man, that's a hard one. Having kids start carrying their trays during lunch and breakfast, have elementary school principal visit the preschool classrooms and read a book about transition, great. Transition meetings, I'm assuming that's maybe for some specific students with needs, or maybe it's for all students, that would be even better. I know sometimes we can do that and sometimes we can't. Shadow day with the kindergartners, how great, that sounds wonderful. These are a great list of ideas. And, maybe that's even something we'll be able to do, is put together a list of ideas to reference for all of you. I think that would be phenomenal. Listening sessions with the preschool admin and elementary principals. I love that collaboration. Kindergarten snapshots, great. We meet with the kindergarten teachers at our elementary schools to discuss kindergarten students, fantastic. Passport to kindergarten, that's what a great activity. Okay, so it sounds like you guys do have a wealth of activities. So hopefully those of you who are looking for activity ideas and things, these are giving you kind of a great start. And hopefully we can continue on with that. Oh, wow, look at that. Kindergarten readiness kit, meeting teachers and going to school. Fantastic. Okay, so let's talk a little bit now about the summer. And I know that during the summer can be a real challenge to plan anything, because most of us aren't, maybe some of you aren't there. So during the summer before kindergarten, though, these practices are the ones that maybe require a little more creativity, but I think you'll find that often any effort is appreciated by a child and family. Especially those who do have unique needs, just that little bit more effort for summer, if it's even the smallest thing, is always so appreciated. So here's some things that maybe you're already doing or that are good for the whole group. Could be that kindergarten teachers host a meet and greet for all students the day prior to the school starting. I know a lot of programs do those kind of things. I even saw during COVID, which, we were just in survival mode, right? A lot of people were doing things like even drive-through meet and greets, where like the teachers were outside, they were dropping off, maybe the parents pulled up in the car, they got to say hi to their new student, they dropped off supplies or whatever, and then they left. It was great, but at least they did it. Similarly, during COVID, I think a lot of people realized they had to start, maybe if they hosted it in-person meet and greet, they had to schedule it individual meetings. So that brief 5 to 10 minute meeting for every family. And a lot of administrators ended up saying that they really liked that almost even better than the whole group, because it was kind of a crazy experience before then. So there's different ways of doing that meet and greet. Another idea, practice is that all parents at least just get a phone call or a postcard or email reminding them of kindergarten curriculum night. Maybe all students receive a postcard from their teacher welcoming them to the class, things like that. Some things to consider that could be individualized based on the needs of specific students that you might try include, thinking about, when we talk about meet and greet, maybe designating a specific time for children who have disabilities, or maybe they have unique needs, to come in and meet the teacher and see the classroom before the school year begins. I think that oftentimes teachers feel like they have to have their classroom perfect before these visits, but really it's much more about making the child have an understanding of what the routine is of drop off and pick up, or associating a teacher's name with a face. It could also be done by just having, maybe 30 minutes before the open house designated for children with disabilities or children who have those unique needs, so they're not fighting the crowd. And then the family members feel good because they also get one-on-one time with the teacher as well. So those are a couple ideas. I had a family, I was interviewing a mom once, and it just really hit me when she said, I was so excited to go to the meet and greet, but my son really has a hard time transitioning. So we were going to do it. We got him out of the car. It took us 25 minutes to get him into the building. And by the time we got to the classroom, there was only 5 minutes left. And so we were at the end of the line and we didn't get to talk to the teacher at all. And she's like, and I just felt like it took so much effort for us to even just get there. And then it was kind of, we didn't get anything out of it. So, consider like the unique needs of a child and see if there's opportunities for you to extend maybe the opportunity so that it's a little bit more unique and individualized for a particular student that may have those unique needs. If you did create a communication plan or individualized transition plan in the spring, make sure you're letting the parent and child know if there's been a staff change or giving them a heads up on classroom assignment ahead of time when it's posted. I know, controversial subject, but some students who need that time to process or struggle with transitions, these are accommodations. So things you can provide to students with disabilities. And again, it's not a privilege if it's an accommodation, although others might wonder why that child gets to know their class ahead of time, but it's because the child needs that, right? So I know, be brave. Sometimes it's okay to have some students get that information a little ahead of time. If there's one thing also that COVID has taught us is that technology can be really helpful for some. So if the parent and child has access to technology, that's a if, right? We want to make sure that we're having conversations with them to make sure that they do. Otherwise, this wouldn't be effective. But a virtual home visit is possible. Great sometimes because it's easier for all, a lot of the individuals involved and easier to schedule sometimes. It might be one way of making a connection before the school year begins. And then lastly, it's important that if possible, kindergarten teachers and support staff have a chance to just touch base at the start of a year. It's a way to make sure that the child's transition plan, if you have one, is up to date, or at least if that you're able to get the accommodations and modifications that are needed for day one, because we want to have students start off on the right foot in the new environment so that they feel comfortable and they feel welcome from the start. Not a week after school starts, that first day. That means if we want our students to do, we want our students to be successful, we want to do our best to have what they need in place when they arrive. If the first day is a struggle, which it very well could be anyway, whether or not you have the accommodations and modifications in place, but let's do our best. We don't want it to be that they're having a hard time because you weren't prepared as best as possible. Okay, so some related strategies, which are, the more specific things that maybe we could do for a child. One idea is that you could have brief meetings, even a call before preschool and kindergarten, between preschool and kindergarten teachers to kind of just share materials and strategies. It could be that the kindergarten team also sends the child and family a video tour of the elementary building and classroom during the summer so that they can review it as needed and practice navigating in and out of the building, things like that. I have pictures up here of materials because, sometimes if we know in preschool they've been using a first then word, that's really helpful. Why doesn't the preschool teacher have the chance to be able to share that strategy with a kindergarten teacher, or even just share the materials, right? Same thing with sensory. There's a sensory kind of kit there that maybe the student really needs that to be able to sit in a large group. Those are all things that can be shared. So what are things that you all do during the summer? Do you do things during the summer before kindergarten starts? Is there anybody that has some transition activities they do or practices they use? Share those in the chat. I know summer's tough. I think oftentimes we think, staff's not in the building, so we can't really do too much. And that's true. But I do know a lot of administrators open their door to being the one to give a student a tour, or, have a family come in and talk to them or show them the building. That's happened. I know that I've talked to a few administrators that have been willing to do that. Summer camp style. I do like that. I've heard that from a couple different districts that do summer camp programs that kind of give students the opportunity to be in the building a little early and get that sneak peek at what their skills and abilities are. So that's nice. Jumpstart to kindergarten program. Yep. Great. Oh, encourage families to visit the playground. Love that idea. Summer kit, things to practice over the summer. Yeah, those are great ideas. Fantastic. Transitional summer program who may need additional help. Fantastic. Yeah, I think those Jumpstart programs, they have a lot of advantages. For children who have unique needs, sometimes they're a little hard because it's another transition, but I think if anything, it gets at least staff out, obviously, like a little bit of a heads up as to what they might need to provide at the start of the school year and how to best support them, right? So, because it's always unsure, we're always not really sure how a student's going to react to the new environment. Okay, so at or after the start of kindergarten, yes, transition continues even after that first day. So some things that you might already be doing or that are good for the whole group. If you have students that you didn't meet before the start, it's important to at least have conversations about what did families do during COVID? You should definitely ask those questions. Why? Because it could give you a really good insight as to the experiences of the family. Were they at home? Did they even get care? This will all help you to know kind of how to plan for those students. So that could be built into a questionnaire. If you have your families complete questionnaires, it could be one-on-one conversations. Hosting school-wide ice cream socials to welcome all students and families to kindergarten are an idea that some people have shared with me. They've also done things like hosted little play dates out on the playground for students and families who are interested in kind of interacting and getting to know others. Providing a whole group lesson on the playground on expectations. Remember, this is a new environment and there's going to be new expectations possibly. So making sure that we're explicitly teaching those things to our students is really important. And then again, continuing the collaboration between families, preschool and kindergarten administrators and teachers during the using the program improvement process. The fall is a fantastic opportunity to say, did all of what we've provided so far, did it work? Was it effective? What could we have done better? So after the start of the kindergarten is a really good opportunity to do those things. Some things that you might consider that could be individualized based on the needs of some specific students are things like having kindergarten and preschool teachers and staff collaborate to support or problem solve situations that maybe have popped up now. The child's been in the first day of school, maybe it was a little rough, maybe that first week was rough. Make sure that you're talking to the preschool team as well as the team in kindergarten to kind of problem solve, because maybe they've tried a bunch of different things that have, worked or not worked, so that you guys can kind of, as a kindergarten teams can learn from those already, things you've already tried. We don't want to have teams do things all over that they've already tried before. That's really frustrating for them. It's frustrating for the student. It's frustrating for families. So making sure we have that communication going on for problem solving. Preschool teachers could also model specific strategies that have been helpful in supporting the specific student or problem solve with the kindergarten teachers on how they could use some of those strategies in the new setting. I used to, when I worked in Valley View School District, they used to have an opportunity for preschool teachers to, at the start of the fall, have an opportunity for them to go to kindergarten classrooms for specific students and be able to model some of the strategies that they had previously used for the kindergarten team. And man, it was amazing how that worked, because I think, it was hard, right? Because it's a new environment and sometimes you do have to modify the way that you're doing things. But I think it's important for them to have a friendly face there. They can see, okay, this isn't changed. I see a friendly face. The student understands that the expectation that they had in preschool is still consistent in the new environment. So in that sense, it was helpful, I think. Parent and kindergarten team members can also update their communication plan, now transitioning it to the full kindergarten team, determine what's the best way to communicate with parents. Because a lot of parents tell me that the transition is also more challenging for them because they've had a lot more communication during the preschool years. And then in kindergarten, it's a lot less. And so making sure that, especially for those children who do have unique support needs, we're having conversations with parents about what their expectations are for homeschool communication. Would it feel good if I emailed you weekly? Would you like a daily contact to let you know how things are going, especially the first week or two of class? Because you can bet that those individual family members are home thinking about their child in the new environment and worrying about what's going on, waiting for that phone call sometimes, like, oh, is something going to happen? So making sure that you are clear about the expectations ahead of time on what communication you're going to be engaging in is really important. In terms of strategies, at the start of the kindergarten year, a peer buddy is a great way of helping support during transitions. And when I say transitions within the transition, like if a child has to now, in preschool, we don't do a lot of going to music, going to gym class, but in kindergarten, oftentimes they do those things. So during those transitions where they're moving out of the classroom or in or around the building, having a peer buddy assigned to a child with a unique need is sometimes helpful. It could be that a social worker is checking in with the child, like I mentioned earlier, or maybe some scheduled times during the classroom day just to check in for the first few weeks of school and let them kind of share how they're feeling, see how things are going, and making sure that, we're also talking with the parent about if the child's expressing concerns or having anxiety as well. So, what ideas do you all have about what you do if you are in a kindergarten setting, or if you work with kindergarten programs? What do you provide for students at or at the start of kindergarten? If you have some ideas about what you do or what your program does, please feel free to share those in the chat. Do you guys have open houses, curriculum nights? Maybe you guys have an opportunity for kindergarten teachers to talk to preschool teachers. And if not, maybe there's opportunities for lots of people to learn from today. Kindergarten roundup, thanks Katie. Social workers are available, thanks Holly, that's good to hear. I know usually at the start of the kindergarten year, it's like all hands on deck for sure. Meet the teacher open house. We've had our pre-K teachers visit kindergartens in the past, great. Wonderful, child and family take a tour of the building. I think it's just so important that we make sure that the collaboration, if we do have children who do have disabilities, or we do have children who are multilingual learners, making sure that the collaboration that we do engage in within the transition process includes general education teachers, special education teachers, teachers that provide the instruction to multilingual learners. Because in my research, we've really found that oftentimes those kindergarten general ed teachers are not always included when we're doing individualized planning for children with disabilities, even when the children are being included in the gen ed environment. What a missed opportunity. Because it's really important that all are a part of this collaboration, or at least we find ways, if we can't have everyone attending meeting, because scheduling can be a nightmare, can we find ways of making sure that the information is shared? Google Docs, during meetings are amazing because they could share to the larger team that aren't there, creating a shared file system to pass along materials and information. What's really important is that you just, make sure that you're considering students as individuals and thinking about your program's needs, taking one or two of the practices or strategies that we've talked about today and kind of just find ways to use them as a great start. Not everyone can do all of these. And like I've said, neither should they, because the process really needs to be individualized based on the needs of students. So just finding ways to review and kind of evaluate what you're already doing, see if that's meeting everyone's needs is a great great place to start. So I appreciate you sharing your time with me today. If you have other ideas you'd like to share, I'd love to hear them. So keep putting them in the chat, email me. I'll put my email address in the chat as well. And I'll turn things over to Dr. Taylor.
I was just taking so many notes as you were going, Michelle. So I don't want to scare anyone, but I might be calling your name out to share some of the wonderful things that you all were putting in the chat as we go forward. And again, I'm kind of watching our time here. We're doing really well, but we want to make sure we do have the time for everyone to share. So, and to be able to call some of you out. And yes, we are watching. Nobody's checking out. It's like, oh my gosh, I hope she doesn't call on me. I'm going to. So essential transition questions. And Michelle's talked about this. I've talked about it. We want to think about, you know, years ago, the initiative was intentional teaching. We don't want to leave anything up to osmosis or like wishful thinking. What are essential transition questions we want to ask? And I have seen that so many of us on here are in that EHS or prevention initiative stage. So we want to think about how is PI different from early childhood education and care? How is Head Start different from Head Start? How is PFA different from kindergarten? How is PFAE different from kindergarten? If PFAE was for 4-year-olds, like in Chicago, their UPK focuses on, you know, full day programs for 4-year-olds, especially we've had this pandemic. If the students didn't immediately transition to kindergarten, and this is again why we're saying, yes, we're talking about early childhood education care to kindergarten, but remember that S on the end of our title, and even the Kindergarten Transition Advisory Committee report itself really emphasize this should be seamless. And Michelle has said it, transitions are a process, just not from age to grade, but even within a grade, it really is a process. What are the intentional, essential questions that we should be asking and we want to ask when it comes to what this looks like for transitioning? We want to find out if there's apprehensions beforehand, if we possibly can, especially, you know, because of the pandemic. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and their child is 5, and they believe very strongly in the vaccine. And her and her husband are already thinking about, well, what do we do if vaccinations aren't available for our child at a very young age? Will they send their child on to school? We want to have those community faith-based, you know, include everyone in that strengthening your cross-sector partnerships to see how can we think about apprehensions, things that people are concerned about. And that's just a few. So in the chat, go ahead and share if you have any other ideas of what would be some of those essential questions that we should be asking. Go ahead and put that in the chat. Michelle talked to you a little bit about the students with disabilities. I kind of want to pivot us to what can we really learn from that process? For students who are very young and have been identified as having a need during the developmental stage, from that birth to 3, they have what is called an IFSP. And because they have an IFSP, when they are at 2.5-ish years old, we have to create a where will I be when I am 3? Because the IFSP is very different from the IEP. The IFSP is focusing on supports for the family. The IEP is talking about what are those educational needs that a child needs in that 3 to 5 or actually 3 to 21 plus age range. When you have conversations with family about the EI, IFSP to early childhood or early childhood special education, IEP, what you do is you give them an understanding of how it is going to be different so that they're not getting there and they're completely shocked and surprised. And if the family is shocked and surprised, it hurts trust. It makes them feel like, well, my child isn't getting everything that they need. Maybe it's that they didn't understand how the needs were going to be met in a different way. So if we think about that, and then we jump ahead to what happens in high school at 14 and a half, there must be a transition plan that takes place as part of an IEP. Every district has to do it. You have to not only invite the child to be a part of those transition meetings, but we have to start thinking about life beyond high school. And one of those things that happens at the end of the senior year, a summary of performance is created. And it's literally just a summary document that says how the child learned best, what supports they needed, what their interests were beyond high school. That document literally goes in the hand of the family of the student. They can take it to their college. They can take it to their, if they go to a community college, if they take it, if they're going straight into working or a CTE, they can take that with them and help them have conversations about their needs. So speaking of generalizing practices, what is it possible that we could use some of those practices that are specific to students with disabilities and make it our own when it comes to transitioning students from EI to pre-K or pre-K to K? Could we have that summary of performance type of document that the family literally is able to take in their hand and take with them when they are going to a new facility? We know we are in a very mobile society. They may be moving outside of your district when they're entering kindergarten. We want them to have that good document. If you've been in education, you know those CUME files, where are they? Where is the CUME file? It's a hard time for families to be trying to think of these things on their own. So just think about those ways that you can use this process here and generalize it for the work that we're doing. So important to accentuate the positive. Remember that slide we had earlier where you have these parallel lines that don't always intersect? Having those conversations about what is similar, how we are more the same than we are different is so important. In Illinois, one of the things that makes us the same, all learning is based off of standards. So you've got your Illinois Early Learning Guidelines, your Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards, and your new Illinois Learning Standards. Those are aligned professional development conversations we can have. Our K teachers and our pre-K teachers and our 0 to 3 teachers looking at those guidelines and those standards to see how they correlate with each other so that we understand the practices that we've had that is happening. We know that in Illinois, all incoming students are screened. Every incoming student into a PFA or PFA program, and certainly Head Start has been doing this for years, they are screened not to determine can they come into this program, they are screened so that the teacher gets a snapshot of the child they are receiving. Well, guess what? In Illinois, all kindergarten students are also surveyed to determine their readiness so that kindergarten teachers can have a guide for the child they've never seen before. What do I know about this child in these important domains of development that will help me create programming, differentiated instruction, small groups, all of those things for my children? So isn't that a beautiful conversation that early childhood education and care colleagues can have with kindergarten colleagues? Hey, well, you know, for our screener, we use the DAO-4. How does that match up with the kindergarten individual development survey? How do the standards match up with the kindergarten individual development survey? Well, we do a lot of observation in early childhood education and care. The Kids is an authentic observational tool that's used to survey children. These are all of the conversations that you can have that highlight and accentuate the positive, how we are more alike than we are different. Just kind of throwing in parenthetically, there's a lot of information that the state board gives for children entering kindergarten, and will be the kids survey will be used to observe and assess their readiness for learning. They have conversations about IEPs, and guess what? Everything that teacher needs to know about that child entering kindergarten, it is coming from the IEP that is created when they are in early childhood education and care, preschool for all expansion, Head Start. That is the sending IEP that goes to the receiving kindergarten teacher. So when they are looking at the kids' guidelines, guess what? It's your IEP that you're sending them that really matters. So we want to make sure, as they're looking at what accommodations are needed, what's the functional level of student. Here again, great opportunities for those aligned professional development between pre-K and K partners, our community-based partners in kindergarten. These are all things that we can do to make sure that as we're looking at the same thing in different ways, we understand that our goal is the same. Our goal is for our children to experience success before they experience frustration. And speaking of that, little anecdote for you here. We talked about just the importance of communication. And this is an honest to goodness retelling of a story from a district where I was consulting. There was some real friction between kindergarten and the PFAE program, because the kindergarten teachers were saying, what are these preschool teachers doing? These kids aren't ready for kindergarten. So you can imagine that the preschool teachers are like, wait a minute, sister, we're teaching, we're working hard. They think just because it's preschool and we say we're play-based, that we're not doing anything with our kids. And so as a consultant, I'm coming in and I'm brought in to kind of, help them bridge the gap of their preschool for all, their early childhood, and their kindergarten. The nitty-gritty of it was this. Children were literally crying over spilt milk. In preschool for all expansion, Eckers 3 tells us every minute that a child is awake is a moment for them to learn. So when children are eating their snacks, if it's a full day program and they're eating their lunch, the preschool for all teachers and classroom assistants are sitting with the children, talking to them, engaging them in conversation, expanding on their ability to ask and answer questions. Sometimes they're opening their milk for them. In kindergarten, children are going into the cafegematorium with a whole lot of people. You've got the kindergarten and the first grade and the second grade classroom in there. They're getting that food. They're putting it on a tray. They're being marched over to a table. There's no one sitting with them, opening up their milk or guiding them as they're opening their milk, having conversations with them. And the meal time was shorter. So guess what was happening? Trays were being thrown out. Children get their milk. They were breaking down in tears, and the rest of the day was hard. Why? Because when children didn't get a chance to eat, they were hungry. They started having behavior problems, atypical behavior. Children were going home, telling their parents that they were hungry. Well, what happened? That I didn't get my food. Families were all upset. Well, how come my baby didn't get a chance to eat? And it had nothing to do with kindergarten children being academically ready for kindergarten. When those kindergarten teachers said these children aren't ready, it had to do with how children were eating and the conversations and the process of eating in early childhood and eating in kindergarten. So these kind of intentional, I saw someone put in there articulation agreements about what is happening in preschool and what is needed in kindergarten. Someone wrote that in the chat. I saw that. Those are the type of things that when we say ready, what do we mean? When we're sending them off, what do we mean? We don't want to leave anything to chance. We want to be explicit in details. Preschool, Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards, there are actually English language standards. Well, in kindergarten, is it explicitly in the new Illinois Learning Standards in kindergarten? Preschool for all. Many curriculums have those specific piece around students who are multilingual learners. What is it like in kindergarten? What is the information we need to tell our colleagues? What should we seek from them? What should we share from them? What do we want to share with our families in advance? Some other things to think about when it comes to sharing. Yeah, someone said they've got 20 minutes to eat. We have to think about our unknown and our known variables. And we have to know the unknown variables are there, but we want to keep ourselves focused on what we know and what we can be empowered to encounter. We know the 2022-23 school year is going to start. We know that our children are going to age out, and we know that evidence-based practices last the test of time. That's why the Department of Education was constantly saying, hey, the law of the land is the law of the land. Evidence-based practices lead to sustained student outcomes regardless. I just kind of want to throw in for us, as we think about the 1920 school year, 75% of that school year was a typical year. So yes, we had to pivot, but your evidence-based practice, I mean, you all have just shared so much in the chat. You've talked about, let me just look here, aligned professional development, how we can look at articulation agreements. Those are evidence-based practices that, yes, that quarter of a year kind of came in and we were all dealing with and are still dealing with a bit of the struggle, but don't be afraid to go back to these evidence-based practices. IELDS, the Head Start framework, the Illinois State Board of Education Family Engagement framework, Illinois Early Learning Project, table reads. Are you doing table reads of your students' IEPs or the 504 plans when they're entering kindergarten? All of those things are so important. We're going to move on, but I want you to just in the chat, think of that during typical circumstances, my school program usually. What did you usually do? It's okay to say, we usually did this, and we added this on. That's really what multi-tiered system of support's about. What are your universal foundations that you've done? And then what did you add on to that? Michelle talked about social stories, and I'm just a real big fan of them. You have your more profound social stories, like what we use in our classrooms for children, especially students with disabilities, as they transition from one area to another. But get the children involved, have them create a social story. It can be, the title page can be any of these things. We've had a lot of programs tell us we don't really want to talk about the new teacher because we don't always know that in advance. Okay, if the new teacher is an unknown variable, a known variable is they're going to a different classroom. Maybe that can be the title of your cover page. I'm going to a new class. If you have an EI or early childhood building, and you know that they're going to be leaving your building to go to a different to a new building for kindergarten, maybe your cover page is, I'm going to a new building. These bullet points here can be any little thing that you can create with the child. I'm going to a new building because I'm going to be a kindergarten student. What is their favorite food? Little things that we can teach children to share about on their own when they get to that new building or that new teacher. And I just, missing my my days of Sesame Street. I'm going to a new classroom. I know Miss Maria will always love me. And then coming back and saying, but I can't wait to meet Miss Frizzle, or I can't wait to go to whoever my new, just kind of adding a little bit of lightness here, because this is serious work. And we've all been kind of knocked off our square a little bit, but these opportunities to let children create for the life that they're going to be living and having their families to be a part of it is so important, really, really important. Administrators remembering your role in supporting transitions. Teachers remembering their role in supporting transitions is so important. Other ideas, as you all have been sharing, of getting ready for kindergarten. lots and lots of resources we have to share with you. The state board came up with, well, actually, this was a collaboration between the state board, the governor's office. We have a resource for you in there about early childhood transition supports. We've given you the page numbers. It's a real breathy document, but we've given you the page numbers. So when you get those resource links, you know exactly where to go to. We do got a little bit of time for some Q&A. So if you come off mute and share, as you are doing that, I want to, it's really important. I want to share something that Renee Krause said about social emotional needs. This is really the time to have those conversations about what are the social emotional development, learning, and competency supports we had in early childhood. What do they look like in kindergarten? I don't know if Susie can put in the NCPMI or maybe Jenny. Early childhood, a lot of what's happening in early childhood is built upon the pyramid model. The National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations has the framework and the website is just phenomenal for social emotional support. Well, what are our kindergarten colleagues doing? Are they using CASEL? Is there a curriculum that's being used, such as Second Step, Calm Classroom? IELDS standards has specific social and emotional standards. What are all the things that are happening on that social emotional level that you can talk about with your kindergarten colleagues so that that social emotional support that children need, we don't have gaps in their opportunities to learn. Oh, okay, you've got 4 minutes. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts that we didn't get to, please feel free to come off mute and ask them. Do my teacher wait time. I want to give a huge shout out to Tammy King for being on with us today. Lori, I did note that you said you're very interested in the WIDA early years resources. Those are available to you. We have that link. Huge shout out to Tammy Notter, who are wonderful. Thank you, Susie. She just put that in the link for the NCPMI website. Our constant advocate for community-based programs, Chris Pennington, again, all the work that you all did on that KTAC report, sharing that information with us. Want to give a shout out there. Jenny, I think this might be a question for you. Sylvia asked specifically about screening tools used for student transitioning. And Sylvia, if you are still with us, I don't know if were you talking about transitioning from pre-K to K or transitioning due to the state's expulsion processes requirements? So if you're still with us, Sylvia, you can come off mute and ask that question.
Or feel free to email earlychild@isb.net and I'll answer you.
And then, sure, I'm sorry, go ahead, Cindy.
If she's not there, we can record the chat. So that's where we can summarize all the strategies that were there. I do want to mention that if they go to ECPL's website, which is eclearningil.org, there's an e-learning page, and on that e-learning page there's really easy access to all the WIDA resources. It goes to the WIDA page, and also I want to let you know that if you're a PFA or a preschool for all expansion program, you can get free access to the pyramid modules, the online modules. And that information is also on our e-learning page. So if you're a state funded program, you can gain access to, we sponsor the implicit bias modules and the e-pyramid modules, which are the modules that cover the pyramid model framework. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity to share that those are some additional free resources for you.
And I think Susie had the upcoming, do you have the date for the upcoming, the next PFA forum?
I do. So the next PFA forum is scheduled for May 11th It's same time, 1 o'clock till 2:30. It is addressing recruitment and enrollment challenges in the new normal. And our presenters are Grace Araya, Marquita Thomas, and Janet Vargas. And then we will also be hosting an additional admin forum, also scheduled for May, but that is on May 18th. And that is frequently asked questions about serving English learners in preschool programs. That one, we will be coming out with additional information, and registration on our website will be available probably sometime next week for that one on May 18th.
Susie,
Oh,
can
we're
I
gonna-
just give a little plug about that one? So
Sure,
that
absolutely.
FAQ document is actually the one that it's a revision of the one that's been on our website since like 2014. So we're pretty excited that it's new, hot off the presses. And so if you've been following that FAQ, definitely go to the website and check that out. And then the webinar will be going through that a little more.
Awesome. And then we will be sending an email. It's going to be a follow-up email within the next probably 48, 72 hours. And it will have a link for an evaluation for this session. And we would ask that you please complete that evaluation, whether you are looking for credit or not. Those evaluations are extremely helpful to us when planning for future administrator forums and ideas. Thanks, everybody. And the recording of this will be available on our YouTube channel via ECPL on the ECPL website. If you have not yet subscribed, you can do so by going to our ECPL website. And we have the recordings from our other admin forums on there as well. And this one will be posted with probably within the next 3-4 days. So thanks again, everybody. We greatly appreciate you joining us for this. And we appreciate all the feedback that you have to share. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. Thank you, Dr. Sands. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Cindy, Barry. And thanks again, everybody, for joining us. You are welcome to sign out at this time.